Hey, welcome back to our level 1 section of Tim Kelly's Master Photo Techniques. What I want to do today is briefly cover some of the goals that we're going to have together, and I do hope you've enjoyed the first couple videos we put up on the DSLR. From here on, I want to cover the principles that are the same, photographically speaking, for any camera you're using. Whether it's a modest DSLR or the highest end pro camera, a pocket digital, all of these things that we're going to talk about are going to apply to you. And that is the elements of a successful image. Now they start with, believe it or not, storytelling. Storytelling is one of the elements that you have to have in your images to make sure they communicate with the viewer. So storytelling is an important component that you should always be measuring when you first set out to make your image. Now I know one of the areas that people have trouble with is composition. I look at images by amateurs and the wannabe pros and pros where I see that composition may not be all it can be. One of the most common problems is too far away to get the story. So I've noticed that with a lot of images, we're not close enough to the action to help tell the story. Now, composition also is a balance, and that is having your subjects balanced in the space so that you have an interesting read. And when we use the word read, we mean looking into the image left to right, as we do here in the Western world, and establishing basically a line to follow through and look at in your image. Composition is a lot more than centering the picture. Centering the picture often is a problem because if you use the spot in the middle of your camera to put your subject, you're doing a bullseye. And a bullseye is not really the place to generally put your subjects. Usually you want to be off center, higher or lower, and we'll show you a few images here so you get the idea of what we're talking about, how much more pleasing it is and how much better story it tells if your composition is pleasing, it has a leading line through it, takes you to the subject. Now another real important and sometimes a baddie for most people is exposure. Exposure is luminance, how bright or dark the image is. And people get in trouble with this even in an automatic mode. And if you saw my other movie about exposure compensation, I believe that will help you a lot, even if you're in an automatic mode. But there's a thing called subject failure that fools your automatic camera. So you got to be aware of that. If you're shooting an image of a group and the sun is behind it and it's a snow scene or a water scene, you know how your subjects are going to look dark in comparison. By the same token, many of you have had the experience of trying to shoot your child on a school stage and it's all black except white little people that are burned up by spotlights. That's another area where we call it subject failure, and you have to learn to override that exposure. That's the brilliant thing about digital is you can look at the image, make an assessment, make a change, and get on with the event or the little sitting you're doing and have it come out wonderful. Another big important component to a successful image. Let's say you've got your composition right and you've got your exposure right because now you've watched our little video DSLR 2, which has all this exposure help in it. Now we're going to talk about almost the creative part of storytelling in your photography, and that is perspective. Perspective is the angle that you choose. I mean, obviously, if you're in a school play, you're in your seat, But if you are in the park shooting your kids or something, you have choices about how to compose. And part of composing is perspective. And that is give your viewer something they haven't seen before. So instead of just shooting little Johnny or Julie straight on every single time and centering them in the camera, try low angles, very low angles. Try high angles. Try shooting from around the corner of a building or a plant or a tree or something. Perspective should be a new point of view. Point of view is used a lot, like in the cooking shows, point of view. What's your culinary point of view? But you can have a photographic point of view, and that is to show your viewers something from a direction that they've never seen it before. And that makes the image very, very interesting to them. So keep that in mind. Perspective is the higher level of composition. And once again, the kind of camera you have doesn't matter. Whether you're using your iPhone or a little point and shoot digital, or you've got the DSLR, no matter what it is, it will be good enough to make great images, unless you're trying to, blow something up very, very large. And most of even today's small cameras can handle that. But let me show you here a couple images that I did with an iPhone, not even an iPhone X. One was an iPhone 5, one was an iPhone 6. And these images both won huge awards. And they were just shot with an iPhone. So, you can do it too, and I encourage you to try. Another major issue that we have with a lot of our photography that we're doing is when we get into low light situations. Now, on your iPhone, for instance, Android, whatever you're taking pictures with, it does what it seems to be a really good job of making good images in very low light. I mean, you even see samples of the candlelight blowing out, the birthday candle type pictures, and they look good. They look good on the camera. They maybe look good on Facebook. But what happens is they drive up so much gain, they raise the ISO effectively so much that they get very noisy and dirty in most cases. So these images, if they're shot in low light, they're probably never going to be able to be very large. But you're going to encounter low light, and sometimes you have to make decisions on your own about how to address it. So low light is a problem. It's difficult for even professionals, but you can learn and practice to get great images in situations that are difficult. And if you watch some of the videos that we do on the DSLR, you'll learn how to choose wide aperture or slower shutter. If you can use a tripod to steady your camera, then you'll be able to make much better lower noise images by not raising the ISO as much as it might do automatically. So instead of, that's the speed of the sensor. Daylight, you can have bright daylight, you can be rated at about 100, and low light indoors, it can be 1,000. And when it's a very low light, it's going to go much, much higher. But of course, noise comes with that. So you have choices, and you can, with your better cameras, choose to set the exposure manually to get better results. And we will continue to bring you tips on just that. So your tripod, any tripod or any steady surface is going to be really an improvement for all of your images in any light. So when it's doable, if you're going to do your family portrait on the couch, put your camera, you do it if you have a self-timer, you're going to put it on a tripod or a small pod of some kind, and you should make a habit of using it more often. You can get little tiny lightweight tripods that you can use, keep in your bag even, pull them up and use them. They're going to make all your images better. Steady camera is a happy camera and better results. So we have quite a few things to address yet in the future episodes here on Level 1 at Tim Kelly's Master Photo Techniques. Some of them are simple, some are hard, and they'll take more time to explain. But let's do everything we can to make your images better. And one of the things I see most commonly is distracting backgrounds. And if you're shooting people, if you're shooting your kids, if you're trying to make something nice of somebody you love, you want to have a background that's decent. Everywhere you go, you can find a nice background. And I say nice in a way that it doesn't distract, that it's maybe color harmonious with your subject, but simple is the key. The cleaner and simpler your background is, the more the viewer will look at the subject. And if that's what you're trying to show, then let's keep it very simple and clean. It will end up with a much better image. We're all making pictures all the time. Some are very serious and some are very quick and on the fly. We have Instagram accounts, we have Facebook. There's places where you just do quick pictures. But the better you get at it, the more competent you're going to look as a photographer, new or very experienced. So let's just review a few of the things that are important. One is composition. Composition is not necessarily centering the subject in your viewer, okay? Let's try to be a little more creative. Remember, too, that backgrounds should be, complementary, interesting, and uncluttered. That's a good thing. Perspective, or, your angle, your point of view, as we discussed earlier, super important that, hey, if you consider yourself a creative person, this is your deal. You can start looking for great new angles and show us something that has not been seen before, something refreshing and new. That makes your images really interesting. Then you want to get your exposure as accurate as you can. And of course, I recommend on the better cameras, even the consumer DSLRs, is to use manual exposure and get used to it, or override it at least. So these are some of the things that are real important in making good images. And don't forget about steadying your camera. Even if you're putting your elbows down on a countertop to hold it nice and steady, ideally, even a small tripod is better than no tripod. So these are some of the things that I think we can employ to help make your images, and I'm thinking mostly your personal images, better. Because I don't think you should be, taking pictures for money until you're pretty darn good. So what we're talking about right now is getting you better, getting you confident at that camera work and creating things that are interesting to the people that want to look at them. And I would love your feedback. I would love your ideas. If you have other topics you want me to address, we will just keep going and try and get you to a new level as a photographer.